Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Chantal Aubry, and I'm the Business Development Manager here at Emergence. I'm pleased to be your moderator today and to welcome you to this Prophix webinar, where we'll be looking at personnel planning so that you can plan for your most important resources. But just a few housekeeping items before we get started. In order to keep the flow of the presentation moving along and on schedule, the audience is on mute today, but we still want to keep this as interactive as possible. So what we're going to ask is that you please type in your questions in the side panel, and we'll review and answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. And you'll also see that we have a couple poll questions throughout the presentation. So the answers are anonymous, so the results will only show the percentage of the responses. So it's always really interesting to read the results. So I would encourage you to participate by answering the poll questions when they come up. Now, because we have quite a few people in attendance today that are new to Emergence, I'd like to give you a super quick overview of who Emergence is. Sorry about that. We are a Bermuda-based organization, and we are a business solution provider. Our primary focus, and what we're probably known for the most, is the implementation and support of business platforms such as Dynamics GP and Dynamics CRM. But we also have a really large focus on corporate performance management, which not everybody knows about, corporate reporting, business intelligence, and business automation. We have a staff of 35 people, including solution architects, business analysts, accountants, and functional and technical consultants. We have people who've been with the organization for 10, 15, and even 20 years, but we also have a lot of new people as well, which makes it a really fun and interesting place to work. We have over 150 clients. Many of our clients started here in Bermuda, but because they have offices overseas, we started to also support their offices in other jurisdictions, which has really allowed us to broaden our reach with our clients. And it's very interesting and fun to see that so many people joining today are actually outside of Bermuda. So that just goes to show how much more work we are in fact doing in the other islands throughout the Caribbean. We have a balanced portfolio of financial services companies, distribution companies, and local and international businesses. And finally, we have access to a large network of trusted solution partners. Microsoft has a very large ecosystem of third-party vendors. So we spend a lot of time evaluating new partners to bring solutions that meet the requirements of all of our clients and the overall Caribbean market in general. And that's exactly how we came to partner with Prophix. A few years ago, we were informed that FRX, which is the financial reporting tool in GP, had reached the end of its life and was going to be replaced with Management Reporter. So it was after evaluating Management Reporter that we recognized that it wasn't going to meet all the needs of all of our clients and that we'd have to find a superior financial reporting and consolidation solution. At the same time, we were told that Forecaster, which is GP's forecasting module, that it was being sunset. So we knew that we also had to find a strong budgeting, planning, and forecasting solution. So our president, Tim Kerr, set out to look for a strong financial reporting solution, and our CPM practice lead, George Robertson, set out to look for a strong budgeting and forecasting solution. And as luck would have it, they both landed on Prophix. So it was after evaluating several different solutions that we unanimously decided on Prophix, and it really has been a great addition to our portfolio. With that being said, we're going to go over the personnel planning portion of Prophix today. And here to do that is our presenter today, Tracy Welsh. Tracy is a solution engineer with Prophix. She's been with Prophix for over 15 years now. And what's interesting about Tracy is that she actually started out as a consultant. So she has actual feet on the ground experience helping customers just like yourselves to implement Prophix. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand it over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chantal. So good morning, everyone. Happy to be here today. So before we dive into specifically the personnel planning, I thought it might be nice just to talk quickly and at a high level about the capabilities of Prophix as a CPM solution. So we have 4 areas that we talk about in terms of CPM that Prophix can help you with. So thinking, above and beyond just the personnel planning, because nowadays we want to make sure that when we buy a tool, it's going to do as much as possible for us. And so Prophix, as Chantel mentioned, has a wide range of capabilities. So starting out on the budgeting and planning side, which is where a lot of our customers start, Prophix can handle all of your budgeting and planning needs, from things like your high-level strategic plans all the way down to your detailed revenue planning, your personnel planning, your expense planning, capital planning, cash flow planning, balance sheet planning, any type of budgeting and planning at any level of granularity. Prophix can handle that. And at the end of the day, what you get is you get a fully integrated planning solution across your organization. Then you can actually capture that data as well as actuals coming in from your ERP system. We've linked directly to hundreds of different ERP systems to pull data in for your actuals to then give you the ability to do integrated reporting and analysis. So you'll see a little bit of that today in the presentation, focused on personnel, but for all of your other types of expenses as well as your revenues, understanding your current results, understanding budget to actuals, budget to forecast, and so forth can be really helpful in terms of enabling you to meet all of your business strategic goals. And because of the automated nature of Prophix, it's very quick and easy to do. No more silos of information, as well as easy access for non-technical users. So things like our interactive dashboards that allow non-technical users to drill up and drill down, looking at all levels of details of their information, being able to drill back to the original data source, typically the ERP system, to actually view transaction data. We also have some new functionality around that we call anomaly detection. So being able to take a look at your transactional data from your ERP. And when I say transactional data, I mean every single transaction, and being able to look for anomalies, whether it's transactions that are outside the normal scope in terms of the dollar values, reversing entries, and so forth. You set up the parameters that you want it to investigate, and you'll be able to get a report that lets you know where you have any risks to your transactional data. So essentially being able to ensure that you have clean data before you then bring it into Prophix and use Prophix to report across your organization. So ensuring that you have that accurate reporting, as well as automating the distribution of the reports and integrating that data with all of your Office products as well. For those companies that have financial consolidation, whether it's intercompany eliminations, multiple currencies, mergers and acquisitions, and so forth, Prophix also has automation features that can allow you to be more effective and more efficient in that area as well. And then finally, all of the areas that we've talked about are all wrapped in workflow. So it gives you the ability to get visibility and control into your business processes, whether it's budgeting, variance analysis, your consolidation and month-end close. All of that can be wrapped in workflow, which will enable the core team to see the overall progress through the business processes, but also enable the end users to very easily see what their part is, and also to access all of their data automatically through workflow and through email. So that overview, all that being said, we're going to focus on sort of the 2 areas we're going to specifically look at the personnel, so workforce planning part of the budgeting side of things, but we're also going to take a look at the reporting side as well. Obviously, it's very important not only just be able to plan your workforce, but then subsequent to that to be able to analyze how you're doing against that plan to help you get better planning for the future. So we're going to look at those two capabilities, but just keep in mind that when you get Prophix, you get all of the capabilities that we've talked about today. So before we start focusing on some of the challenges and how Prophix can help, I want to talk a little bit kind of about the significance of the workforce planning. So depending on what industry you're in and your individual company, the percentage of expenses that relate to your workforce can be anywhere from 20 to 90% of your expenses. So I'm curious to see where your companies might fall on this spectrum. So we're going to pull up a question that asks you to give us some information on that, and just a reminder that the answers will be completely anonymous. So you won't be giving away any information to the other individuals on this webinar, but it will give us a bit of insight into you know, kind of where you're coming from in this area.
Okay, so that first question is, workforce-related expenses make up the following percent of overall expenses. So you can select either less than 25%, 25% to 50%, 51 to 75, and then greater than 75%. So we're going to give you a minute to lock in your votes. Okay, I think that most people have answered by now. So, oops, there we go. Oh, so we've got most people at 51 to 75%, 60%.
Thank you, Chantal. Yeah, so looking at the results, we have about 20% are in that 25 to 50%. We have 0 at less than 25%. And that makes sense because I don't think you'd be here today if your workforce expenses weren't a significant amount of your total expenditure. So that makes sense. And also not surprising to me is the 60% of you that are at that 51 to 75% level. That falls in line with what we see with our customers that are purchasing Prophix and doing their workforce planning in Prophix. And then we have the 20% at greater than 75%. And so you're going to see as we go through the rest of the presentation, you know, how Prophix can help in an area which is such a huge, you know, percentage of the costs that you're trying to budget and plan for. So that's really great. So let's move on. So for smaller companies, it's not necessarily as difficult to have pretty good insights into the existing composition of the workforce. But for larger companies, this can actually be pretty challenging, particularly if you have a lot of part-time or temporary workers. And how do you know what types of workers you need, how many you might need in the future, and how do you plan for things like training periods and ramp-up time? Finally, how can you anticipate attrition on your existing workforce, especially if you don't have clear visibility into the historical workforce data? So these are some of the challenges that our customers and our prospective customers tell us all the time that they're facing. And of course, standing in the way of them being able to achieve this are a number of tactical challenges. So let's take another minute and see what types of challenges you guys are facing in terms of meeting these objectives.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. So the question that we have now for you is, which of the following challenges apply to your organization? Select all that apply. So you can select more than one in this case. So we've got unwieldy spreadsheets, data security, forecasting future workforce needs, understanding workforce gaps, and identifying and explaining workforce variances. So we'll just give you a minute to lock in your votes again. A couple still coming in. Okay, let's take a look at the results. Any surprises there, Tracy?
Actually, a little bit. Data security. That's a little bit of a surprise. We do hear quite often that that is something that can be of concern. So you guys are obviously doing a great job already with keeping your information secure. So that's awesome. But okay, unwieldy spreadsheets, we've got 25% there. Forecasting future workforce needs, that's 100%. That's totally something that we would expect. And again, you know, that is it's a little bit of a function of spreadsheets. And I'm going to show you and talk to you about how Prophix can help with that, how you can sort of take the existing information that you're already putting into your budget and have that translate out into future workforce requirements. So we'll talk a little bit at a high level how Prophix can do that. Understanding workforce gaps, that's another big one at 75%. And identifying and explaining workforce variances, 75%. So yeah, so we're going to take a look at how Prophix can help you do, you know, kind of all of that. Talking about, you know, looking at your current workforce and what you might need in the future. And then as you're moving through the year, looking at those variances to headcount, whether it's the number of heads versus dollar values and so forth, and how Prophix can give you insight. So yeah, no, great feedback and information from everyone. Thank you. So just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, you know, what we find, and this isn't necessarily just workforce spreadsheets, but we find that nearly 90% of spreadsheets have at least one error. Now, some of those errors are really not very significant and not something to be concerned about, but errors can often compound themselves, and it can then introduce a little bit of doubt into the validity of the data. So Prophix takes care of all of that because of our database. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. And then also populating existing spreadsheets with your existing workforce data, that can be time consuming and error prone as well. And then understanding workforce gaps and forecasting future needs. So that can be challenging, as I said, in Excel, given, you know, the limitations of multiple spreadsheets, formulas, trying to link different spreadsheets together and so forth. So Prophix, the database allows you to take a driver-based approach to the workforce demand. So as you're doing your budget and you're putting in drivers, for example, you know, I mean, these vary across different industries, but let's say if you're a call center, you might be forecasting out the number of calls. You can actually take that call volume and you can translate that into the number of positions you would need to fill in order to answer those call volumes. So it's taking the data that you're already potentially putting into your plan, but allowing the integration to carry that into the workforce demand. And so we can do that, and it can be, you know, whatever drivers your particular industry is using. You know, if you're a sales organization, you might use number of sales or sales dollar value to determine the number of sales reps you need. or the number of customer support agents you need, that type of thing. So really any driver that you're using, you can then turn that into your workforce demand plan. And as I mentioned, Prophix reporting, it has very strong integrated reporting, dashboards, reports, ad hoc analysis. So you can get that visibility into all aspects of your workforce, including the variances, budget to actual, at all levels too, from the department level to the position level, all the way down to the individual employee level. So let's get started on the software itself. So what you're seeing is just simply the agenda for our demo itself. So we're going to start out on the home screen, just spend a couple seconds talking about how easy Prophix is to navigate for your end users. Then we'll take a look at workflow. So how workflow, we're going to focus on how it can help the end user today. Then we'll take a look at the personnel budgeting, so how Prophix can help you to budget out all of your different staffing requirements and your costs. And we'll look at all the different cost categories and how Prophix can calculate those numbers to give you that complete staff plan. Then we'll look at the reporting and analysis that you get with Prophix. Okay, so what you're looking at is a Prophix dashboard. So Prophix dashboards it's the home screen that everybody logs into when they get Prophix, and it's accessed through any modern browser on any device, and it's configurable. So all your different users will get different information depending upon their security profile. So content, layout, colors, everything is can be individually configured, and it's end user configured, so you guys would be able to do it very simply, very easily. This particular dashboard has a lot of information, a lot of charts and graphs and KPIs and so forth, but you can create very simple login screens for their users if you want, just including the navigation piece, which is here on the right. So it's all of the key reports that the users might look at on a regular basis and any workflow tasks that have been assigned to them. So you can keep it really simple for users that just want to get in, look at a couple reports, maybe enter a budget or two and get back out again. Or you can give your users a wide variety of charts and graphs and KPIs to allow them to use the tool to do more deeper level of analysis. It's up to you. So workflow for the end user is quite straightforward. I can see all of the tasks that have been assigned to me. So we're looking specifically at budgeting tasks today. So primarily the personnel planning. So all I have to do as an end user is click on one of these tasks and it takes me to my data entry screen. So it's really easy to navigate Prophix and get where you need to go. By the way, Prophix also integrates with your email. So in addition to getting all your workflow tasks pop up on your Prophix home screen, you also get automated emails that come to your regular inbox letting you know you've got something going on in Prophix, and within that email will be a link to your various templates, so the users don't have to be logged into Prophix to understand what's going on in their Prophix world. So I'm opening up, before we dive into the employee budgeting, what you're seeing on the screen now is actually a departmental template. So this is a budget template that's allowing me to enter all of the expenses associated with my particular department. Notice that the personnel piece is empty. So that's because I'm going to do that budgeting in a dedicated area of Prophix, and I'm going to do it at a more granular level than the department level. So we're going to see how we can go and we can do that, and then how that data is going to integrate back into our overall budgets. In addition to the budget numbers we have here, we've actually got our demand plan is showing here at the bottom for the department. So it's beyond kind of the scope of today's presentation to show you exactly how we would set that up. You know, we're more than happy to work with Emergence and to give you a more detailed demonstration on how you can take your individual drivers and create a plan such as this. I just wanted to show you. So what we have here is for each department, we have a required headcount being calculated based on the drivers for the different department. And this is being done at the job position level. So I can see all of the positions that I need in my department. I can see the number of individuals I'm going to need to fill those positions. And as those the demand for those positions changes, I can see that flow into my my plan here, and I can even build in ramp up time. So in this case, I need the position of analyst for the last quarter of the year, but that new hire is going to take 2 months of ramp up time. So I've got the plan for that new hire coming in 2 months earlier. So you can see that the system can use your different drivers to calculate the different job positions required, how many, and when do we need to hire them to give them ramp up time in order to be able to be ready to go when we need them to get up and running. And so that's done through a series of centralized formulas within Prophix itself. I'm going to talk more about those formulas in just a minute. So going from the high level budgetary spreadsheet, I can go back now and I can go in. I know the positions I need to hire. I can now go into my detailed personnel plan and I can now budget for my headcount. So what you're now seeing on the screen is an input sheet for budgeting my employees at the named employee level. Now, if you want to do it only at the job position level, you don't want to have the names, you could do that too. So instead of having Cheryl Sampson as a manager, you could have manager 1, manager 2, manager 3, or however you want to set up your naming convention. So again, the tool is very flexible to meet all of your needs. So let's talk a little bit about how we got here. There's a ton of information on this screen. And one thing that's really important to understand about Prophix is it is very flexible. So the specifics of what you're going to pull into the system and what you're going to cost out would be completely configured for your business needs. Now, how do we get your unique information into the system? Well, we connect to either your payroll system itself, such as ADP, which is a very common one, or we can pull in flat files. So a lot of times, I know for ADP, they will provide us with a data dump of all the key information, and we can then just import that data into your personnel plan. And that's something that an end user with no technical experience can set up and run themselves. So you're not going to be reliant if you want to do different scenario plans, you want to do reforecasting throughout the year of your personnel, you can get those data dumps out of your system and a non-technical person can import that data going forward. So we import all of the key data, so all of the different employees We can import things like, are they an annual employee versus hourly? Are they temporary? Are they permanent? What's their job position? What's their salary? Or if they're an hourly employee, what's their hourly rate? Stuff you're not seeing on here, other things that you might want to think about importing are things like commissions, maybe revenue targets for your commissioned employees, commission percentages. So any information that you want to budget or report on at the employee level, you bring that into Prophix, and then you can use that information to then budget or forecast out all of your costs for each employee. So we've got a number of cost categories that you can see, some very common ones that our customers do. So earnings, for example. So I'm just going to open up my earnings. So these are centralized calculations, and they use business logic rather than cell references to build out your calculations. So it's very easy to understand and to build out your formulas. So for example, the earnings, the system will go and it will reference, is this an annual employee or is this an hourly employee? For the annual employees, it will take the annual salary and it will spread it across the months based on your company calendar. And there's a simple drop down and you select spread, and then the system knows to parse out your data. So very intuitive setting up these calculations. For the hourly employee, it will know an employee is hourly, and you can set up a formula where you're taking the hours worked in a month times the hourly rate. And again, you're using that business logic to calculate out your various employee costs. So you can see those here. If you have other types of formulas and calculations to calculate out earnings, Prophix can do those as well. So one very common type of cost that basically all of our customers have and that can be really challenging, things like payroll taxes. So again, we take the earnings and there's a simple input screen where you can put in the amount, the percentage that needs to be calculated off of the earnings. The system will look up that employee's earnings automatically, will apply that percentage. You also indicate if there's a cap and what that cap amount would be, and then the system will automatically cap out the employees in the appropriate month, regardless of what month they started. So when you budget out future hires, these calculations will happen automatically for those future hires as well. And the system understands payroll taxes and understands that for new employees, it has to start again mid-year, and will cap those employees out or not as appropriate based on their salaries. So there's a lot of intelligence built into the system to calculate out those very special and unique calculations that relate to your payroll. And, so we can actually take an existing employee. So we've sort of looked at the overall plan, but if we want to see one particular employee in more detail, we can actually do that. So we go to the edit employee. So this is all the information pertaining to a particular employee, including things like a health benefit plan. We've got home state to help with those state taxes. We've got a retirement match, 3%, and so forth. So we've got all this information. We can actually click on the summary tab, and we can see all of the detailed numbers that have been calculated for that individual employee. And we have a couple other things as well. So we have an actions tab that would allow us to do things like promotion. So this particular employee, Cheryl, we're forecasting that she's going to get a promotion from manager to senior manager, and we think that's going to happen in the month of July. So what that's going to do is, starting in July, it will apply any salary increase, but also if there are any calculations that need to be applied to senior managers, those will start in the month of July as well. So it's going to automate out the costing for Cheryl in her new position. We also can do employee allocations across different departments or different projects. So here we're saying we want to calculate out and allocate out 25% of Cheryl's costs to a different department, and again, starting in July. So all great things are going to happen to Cheryl in July. We set that up here in the system, and it's going to then automatically calculate, and it's automatically going to aggregate, and it's going to push all those costs to the appropriate department and also to the appropriate GL account. So the earnings will go to the appropriate salary account, payroll taxes will go to the appropriate payroll account, and so forth. And that's all set up centrally. Then finally, all you need to do is you can come in and you can review your existing employees, and then referring back to our employee demand, we can then budget for our new hires. So you can have the system automatically generate employee IDs, or you can generate them yourself. And so when I add a new ID, it's going to ask me to give a name to the new hire. And of course, I don't know at this point the name of the person I'm planning on hiring. I just know I want to hire an analyst. So I just pop that into the name for now. And then I pick the job position. So I want to hire an analyst. I can give, what do I think is the base salary going to be for that employee? And all the boxes in red are required fields. So it helps me to easily ensure that all of the information that I need to put in is put in and put in correctly in order to forecast my plan. So now I've reviewed my existing employees, and I have added a new employee, and I can see my hire date is July, and I can see that my earnings have been calculated and spread across the year starting in the month of July. So everything now is fully automated to cost out this employee in the month of July. A simple click of the update button here now is going to take all of this information, and it's going to integrate it into the rest of my budget, so that I can now see at the department level my fully costed out department for all of my different, in my case, it's the marketing department. So I can just refresh my template, and you can see that the data has flowed into this template, and I can now see a fully costed out budget for this particular department, the marketing department. So obviously there's a ton more detail on the planning side. There's, how do you do reforecasting, which, with Prophix you can do very easily. You can take each of your workforce plans, you can attach them to a different budget version. So here I've got a budget. I can do a separate workforce plan for my scenario, and I can have that flow into the scenario. I can reforecast throughout the year. Obviously, there's a ton of calculations out there that potentially you guys would, need to do your costing out. And Prophix can handle all of it. We have many, many years of experience doing this. We've spent a lot of time in research and development dollars building out the workforce plan because of the information that you shared earlier on the, the amount of costs that the workforce, takes up in percentage to the rest of the costs and so forth. So I would encourage you, if you like what you've seen so far, but you have questions around the types of calculations, to reach out to Emergence, and we'd be happy to go into more detail in those areas. But just to wrap up, I did just want to talk a little bit about the reporting side as well. And so now that we've got all this great information on our workforce, we've planned out for the year. We've also imported from the ERP system some actuals. So now we can start looking at variances. So here we can see we've got our content marketing, field marketing. So we've got a couple of departments. We've got actual, we've got budget, and we've got variances. And this is our payroll costs. And so Prophix has some new artificial intelligence capability that we're really excitedly rolling out now, that actually will allow our AI to provide for you some analysis of your various charts and graphs. So that's what you're seeing here. So the AI will write it out in words. Don't worry about reading it all at this time, but it will also speak to you and talk to you about those results. Now, when we were testing it earlier today, and unfortunately, the volume on GoToMeeting was making the AI voice very soft, so it's very difficult to hear. So I won't subject you to the frustration of not being able to hear hear the narration. But if you, once you have it installed and you're not having to go through GoToMeeting anymore, you would simply click on this button here, and a voice would actually provide you with that narration. So, it's, again, wave of the future. Prophix is very, very at the forefront in terms of AI development in the CPM world. And again, we have lots of capabilities around artificial intelligence. If that interests you, what else can we do? I talked about the anomaly detection earlier. That's all a part of our AI strategy. We also have the ability to give voice commands to Prophix to launch various tasks. That's clicking on this button here. So we have lots of capabilities that we're in the process of rolling out now. So again, I would encourage you, if these types of things are interest to you above and beyond personnel planning, would highly recommend that you reach out to the folks at Emergence, and they can facilitate some more discussion around that and some more detailed demonstrations. But continuing on with just understanding our personnel costs, Prophix can provide you, and you can provide your users, with guided analysis of your personnel costs. So attached to my dashboard is a more detailed variance report that's going to allow you to look at, in this case, we're looking at our different departments, and we're looking at the month-to-date and year-to-date actual budget and variance at the position level. And so if we open out our filters here, we can see that we can get that information for any month of the year. And so you can build this variance report at the beginning of the year. Then as you're pulling the data into the system, it will automatically populate the report, and you can see your variances easily at a glance. You can also look at not just your cost variances, but you can look at more detailed. So you can look at the individual salaries, payroll taxes, and so forth. And you can look at your headcount variance. So you can see that since we finished our plan at the beginning of the year, we're looking pretty good. We don't have any gaps yet. We don't have any variances that we need to worry about. But of course, that can change as we move throughout the year. Then you can also, if you want to see even more detail, so rather at the position level, you can link to yet another Prophix report that will allow you to now see all of your payroll costs, in this case, laid out across the year at the individual employee level, and you can see all of the costs associated with that employee, the annual number, as well as out through the months of the year. Now, if you want, for reporting purposes, you want to see things like the employee's job position, their date of hire, all that can be included in these reports as well. So there's a wealth of information here that you can give to your users to allow them to really understand what's going on in all of their workforce. And again, security will always take precedence, whether it's department level data or employee level data. And security is handled through the filters and the reports. So you can see I've got a number of different reports here. So if I didn't have security permission to see these, they just would not appear in my dropdown and I would not have access. So Prophix provides you with a very high level of security for all your data, but also efficiencies in terms of the number of reports you have to build and so forth. Because if you had to build one of these reports, for every single department, and you had to build it separately, then you had to send it out separately to each individual that needs to see it. That could be quite time consuming, but Prophix allows you to build a single report and then use the system to parse the data based on security. So even though security wasn't a big issue for you guys, as we talked about earlier, perhaps the efficiency of being able to build these mass reports and have the system do the security, that might be something that would be of interest and kind of give you back more time in your day to do more value-add activities rather than spending time, building reports and putting in data and so forth. And then finally, in terms of reporting, Prophix has a really great ad hoc analysis tool that allows you to slice and dice your data and look at your data in all different kinds of ways. So we'll finish up on that front. So now what you're seeing is you're seeing the raw data, and I can now go in and I can drag and drop, point and click, and I can see my data any way I want. So for example, I can go in and I can grab my budget data here, and I can go in and I can add my actuals to this. I can add my variance, and I can very quickly get to a variance report at the detailed employee level. If I want, I can go ahead and I can add in my total payroll costs. I don't have a total here. I can very easily and quickly add that in, and it's going to go and it's going to add it in for every employee. If I want to see my budget across the different departments that I have security access to, I can drag my departments up, and now I can see data for my different departments. Right? So I can see, okay, so which employee is associated with which department, and I can go in and I can see that information, and I would be able to see employee allocations and so forth as well in here. So this slice and dice tool, this is available for all Prophix information, not just payroll. So if I wanted to look at a higher level variance report at the department level and then slice and dice that data, I would be able to do that as well. And so just keep that in mind as you reflect on what you've seen today. The tools that you see in one area, like the ad hoc analysis tool, apply to payroll, but it also applies to your revenues. It would apply to your balance sheet, to your department level P&Ls, and so forth. And on that note, before we jump over to questions, I just want to add that the area of software that we were looking at for the personnel planning, thinking back to that detailed schedule, that at its most basic, it is a very powerful calculation engine, and it does things like time-based calculations and attribute-based calculations really well. And so what I mean by attribute calculation is think about lookups in Excel. So looking up if this employee is a VP, then apply this calculation. So it does those types of calculations very, very well. And there's other areas of your budgeting and planning that benefit from those types of calculations. So I've put just a few examples on the screen here so that you can see that Prophix is very flexible, and it's going to meet a wide variety of your budgeting and planning needs. And so your investment in Prophix is going to yield a very high rate of return because of the ability to tackle all of the planning needs across the organization. So project planning, cash planning, that's huge in today's, business with, tighter budgets and tighter controls and so forth. So that's an area that we see growing a great deal in Prophix, and especially using the area of the software that we've been looking at today. Travel and entertainment also, so if you want to budget your travel at the employee level, detailed revenue planning, deferred revenue is huge in using that more detailed area of the software. So these are just a few examples of the different areas that that you can actually use that area of the software, in addition to the more generic budgeting capabilities that I touched on, but that we can focus on in another presentation. So I hope this has answered some of your questions in terms of how we can help with your workforce planning. So what I'd like to do now is answer some of the questions that we've had come up throughout the presentation. And thank you, by the way, we've had some really great questions from our audience.
Okay, I'll read those for you, Tracy. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was great.
Thank you.
Just a reminder to anyone who hasn't submitted their questions yet that you still have a bit of time. We've got about 5 minutes left. So please type in your questions into the question box in your control panel. So the first question that we have, Tracy, is can you budget for sales rep commissions?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I touched on it very briefly, but the answer is yes. So we actually do this ourselves at Prophix. So we set a number of high-level revenue targets. Then we set more detailed revenue targets to the individual sales reps. That information then flows into the personnel planning. And so each sales rep would then have a revenue target that they would need to hit. And we would typically then have some historical information around, how many sales reps, which sales reps typically hit their target. And so we can then say, okay, so we think this will be roughly 80%. Then we can take that and we can apply a commission percentage and then calculate out those commissions for each and every sales rep. And if you have accelerators, you can build that into it as well. And do it in a more complex fashion, but the answer is yes. Having information flow from the revenue plan into the personnel plan and then push that information back into the revenue plan and the P&L and so forth, and even link that to your cash flow as well.
Great, thank you, Tracy.
Awesome.
The next question that we have is, can your system do allocations across multiple projects?
Yes, great question. So we were focused more on departmental in that particular demonstration, but you can actually assign your employees to projects instead of or in addition to departments, in which case you could have an employee have a home project, if you will, and then allocate the remainder of their costs, so maybe 50% in their home project and then 50% across multiple projects. Or you could have a project neutral home for everybody and then allocate 100% of those costs across those multiple projects. So the answer is yes, and there's a number of different ways that you can do that, again, depending upon your unique methodology. And we do also supply best practices. So if you're not sure what you want to do in any of these areas, we have a lot of experience. Emergence has a lot of experience. So together we can help you and provide best practices as well as meeting the particular methodologies that you guys want to use.
Perfect. Next question is, can you calculate utilization metrics?
Yeah, so great question. So absolutely. So it would work in a similar way as all formulas, even like we talked a little bit about the revenue attainment percentage. So utilization could be, very similar to that. So you might forecast out the number of hours worked on, say, a project, but then you can look at what are the actual hours that employee worked, and then take the, the capacity, so the total hours available, do a little calculation, and that would get you to your utilization. And then you could use that as historical information then to help you plan for the future. If you want to then plan, say, revenue, project revenue from an employee perspective, you could then use that utilization metric that you calculated to help to plan out the revenue. So taking the information from the actuals that you can calculate and being able to apply that information to your plans at the employee level, and having the data flow between both of those areas of your budget happen automatically and easily, so that you're not having to worry about errors and so forth.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. Last question, because we are out of time here.
Yes.
Can you set up reminders, and can you see where people are in the budgeting process?
Yeah, absolutely. So that would all be part of our workflow. So workflow allows you to send out, or allows the system to automatically generate emails reminding individuals that they have something due, and then within that email would also be a link to the particular area that they need to go in the software. And likewise, the person monitoring the workflow can see if individuals have submitted their budget, if they've started it, and so forth.
Perfect. Thanks, Tracy. And as Tracy mentioned previously, if you want to discuss your company's requirements in a bit more detail to see if Prophix would be a good fit for your organization, you've got Rob and my contact details there in front of you, so we'd be happy to assist you with that. Also, if you think others in your organization would get value from this webinar, a recorded version will be available and sent to you, so please feel free to share that with your colleagues. And finally, a survey will pop up on your screen when we close the webinar, so please take a few seconds to answer the survey. Your feedback's really helpful in making sure that we are delivering content that you want to hear about, so thank you very much for taking the time to provide that feedback. Also, we'll be offering a free ebook in the closing survey, so make sure you get that. Once again, thank you, everybody. I'm sorry we went over by 2 minutes, but I think well worth the time. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you again next time. Have a great day, everybody.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks again.